Hey everybody, Dr. Rob Silverman here. I've got my friend, colleague, leader in healthcare, Dr. Dane Donohue. Hey, Dr. Dane, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic, Dr. Rob. Excited to be with you.
I'm excited you were able to make it back. We had so many people ask about you and a lot that you do. I mean, your bio is lengthy. I mean, I don't know where to start, but here's what's most important. Dane is, without a question, a leader in healthcare and a leader in chiropractic. Dane's also the founder or co-founder of 8 Weeks to Wellness. He has a Amazon best-selling book. He's a national and international speaker. He's a great chiropractor, and I know he'll really like this. My understanding, since I've talked to his wife, he's a great husband, he's a great father, he's a great friend, and he's a great mentor. So I'm happy to have him here and speak about some different things. So what do you got cooking today? Where you been? What have you been up to?
Well, you know what? It's interesting. Maybe I'll start off with this. I thought it was really fascinating. I just finished up with a patient, Dr. Rob, he was 22-year-old male, really lovely kid who had a germinoma in his brain and his hypothalamus extending into his pituitary. He just got done radiation treatments, about 8 weeks of radiation treatments that was successful, as far as they know was successful. And you can imagine how many doctor's visits this kid has had over the past 3 months. And he came in with his mother, and they got done. And he said something really interesting, Dr. Rob, and I think it's appropriate in this forum. The mother had tears in her eyes. She said, this is the first visit that a doctor's actually looked at the health of my son instead of trying to kill something in my son. And I thought that was a really fascinating statement. So, let's hope that in this discussion we can create some healing instead of trying to kill something.
Well, yeah, that's exactly what a conversation piece. Today we're going to be talking about blessings or burden as you age. We're going to talk about aging, and you really spoke to it. So we'll come in from a different angle. So many people talk about lifespan, but we like to refer to it as health span. Lifespan is sort of like your chronological age, how old you are on your date of birth. Your health span is sort of your biological age. It is, you may be 50 in your on birthdays, but you may be 35. You may be 50 in birthdays, but you may be 65 biologically. So let's take a look at that, and let's really dig into the idea of why aging is so important and what is the conversation piece now.
Yeah, and I came up with this term of blessing or burden because I honestly believe that successful aging starts in your 30s and your 40s and your 50s. Most people, Dr. Rob, wait until their retirement age to really start thinking about, longevity and successful aging and quality of life and these types of issues. And oftentimes we see, in somebody's 30s or 40s that they're moving in the direction of disability, and we can literally look at it objectively in their lab work, in their muscle mass, in their movement patterns, things that we measure in our office. And we know that there's this chronologic and biologic aging. And there's some fascinating studies that have been done. One is the Dane study. And I don't know if people are familiar with this study, but this was a study that's been ongoing now for over 50 years from Dunedin, New Zealand. And they looked at over 26-year-olds. So this study started in the early 70s. And they looked at 1,026-year-olds. And they've actually been looking at these individuals every 4 years since the early 1970s. So now we're talking over 50 years. And they've been evaluating them psychologically. They've been evaluating biomarkers of health. So they're looking at things like muscle mass, visual acuity, their A1C, their C-reactive protein, their triglycerides. They're looking at things like liver function, kidney function, and then doing a lot of psychological testing. And what they found from this study, looking at 1,026-year-olds, that everybody ages differently, right? So, you have these 26-year-olds in 10 years will all be 36, but biologically they'll be in a very different place. And so we know that we age chronologically and biologically very different. And when they did the study at age 38, so it was 12-year follow-up. So after 26, they measured these individuals, at age 38. So it's 12 years after they started the study. And they had a biological age range in the group, Dr. Robert, from 28 to 48. So even though that the individuals were chronologically 38 years old, biologically, when they looked at all these biomarkers of aging, there was a range from 28 years of age biologically to 48 years of age biologically. And what they found that the individuals that were on the older biological spectrum, they had decreased physical health. They had decreased quality of life, because their movement patterns were not as good as the younger biologically aged person, even though all these people were the same age. So it's very fascinating. Their visual acuity wasn't as good, So I think the real take-home message here, Dr. Rob, is we can't wait until we're 60, 70, and 80 to start thinking about aging.
Yeah, that's a great takeaway. We can't. Aging starts now. So I wrote some notes down. Aging is characterized by a gradual functional decline. To piggyback on what you said, and aging occurs across multiple organ systems, causing progressive deterioration that eventually results in tissue degeneration. Aging is the number one reason that we have chronic disease. And I think we as chiropractors, when we talk about things, we're real pointed at avoiding the chronic disease because we want to give that good quality life activities of daily living.
Yeah, and if you look, there was a successful aging model that was developed by Rowe and Kahn in 1997. And if you really look at this, I think it defines it pretty well. There's basically, it's a three-legged stool, Dr. Rob, and each legs of the stool is very important. But the first one is minimizing disease, right? And particularly chronic disease and disability as we get older. So minimizing the things like Alzheimer's disease, minimizing, early death from cardiovascular events, minimizing diabetes, minimizing, significant degenerative arthritis that affects our ability to have a quality of life. So the first leg of the stool is minimizing the risk of disease, chronic disease. The second one is maintaining active physical and cognitive function. So again, physical function, being able to do the things you want, is really interesting, Dr. Rob. But I was in Florida this past weekend taking my youngest son to visit a chiropractic college. And I actually visited my stepmother while I was down there. And she lives in a community called The Villages. And I don't know if you've ever heard of The Villages in Florida, but it's 150,000 retirees. Okay. This community is so large, Dr. Rob, that it has its own zip code. Okay. It's enormous. I've never seen so many retired people in one place in all my life. 18 golf courses in the retirement community. I mean, softball courts and pickleball courts and, shopping centers. Everybody drives their golf cart everywhere. You don't need to get in your car because you can drive your golf cart to the grocery store, to the clothing store, everywhere. But what was really fascinating is, that there was a range when I looked at the people of, who was really enjoying all of the activities that were provided by this, this community and who wasn't. So there's no sense in getting to this age of retirement and then not having the physical or cognitive function to actually be able to enjoy it. Imagine being in a community that socially you're so engaged. They had every club you could possibly imagine. You like backgammon, there's a club for it. You like canasta, there's a club for it. You like debate, there's a club for it. There's all these different social outlets. But let's face it, if you don't have the cognitive function, you're not going to be able to enjoy those clubs. So it's having good physical and social function. And the last one is kind of what we're talking about, being engaged in the social aspect of life. And there's so much research, Dr. Rob, on successful aging tied to having a social network of people and I think for me, having a social network is what makes you want to age successfully. If you don't have a social network and your life is all about you, then who cares if you get old, right? But if you have other people, grandkids, or you have, some sort of, thing that you devote your life to. For example, my stepmom told me how she's a big sister. She goes every week. She goes to elementary school, and she has, she's a big sister. She does big brothers, big sisters, and she, helps a student with reading and helps a student with their homework and stuff like that. Well, that's awesome. It's those types of social engagements that's going to say, hey, listen, my life matters, so I better take care of myself.
Absolutely. And I hope what that wasn't lost in there is that, your son's going to Cairo school real quick. That's a fourth generation. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
That's fabulous. And it's great when you use the metaphor of the stools. So in a nutshell, what you're saying, which was great, is the idea of inflammation also. And that's something that we address. So we have this term called inflammaging, which is that low grade inflammation that most people have, but because they don't wear it and they don't have to call the fire department, they don't know that they're on fire burning. So why don't you give some of the ideas on how to quell some inflammation or inflammaging from the inside out?
Okay, I mean, it's such a great principle. And, so one of the things that we do on all of our patients, Dr. Rob, is when they come in, we do a pretty in-depth assessment. And part of that assessment is we do a laboratory assessment. And part of that laboratory assessment is we measure something called high sensitivity C-reactive protein. And as you know, that's a cytokine that is a biomarker of inflammation in the body. And it's specifically sensitive to inflammation in the blood vessels. So, inflammation is really the backbone behind all chronic disease. Everything when it comes down to it, Dr. Rob, is an itis. It doesn't matter whether it's colitis or arthritis or inflammation in the brain. We know that inflammation is the backbone. And so where there's smoke, there's fire, right? And the more smoke, probably the bigger the fire. So the more inflammation you have in your body, and we know that inflammation is just the sign of damage in the body, of the body trying to repair itself. But the bottom line is it's a cause, okay? And then there's a cause to the cause. So we can look at inflammation in the body, and many times, you can actually look at a person, look at their skin, and you can see whether they're inflamed. You can touch their joints, and if they're very swollen or tender, a lot of times that's indicative of inflammation. So I think inflammation is one of these things that is the backdrop of almost all chronic disease in the body, but we have to understand where the inflammation is coming from. And inflammation in large part comes from three areas. It comes from physical stressors, it comes from biochemical stressors, and it comes from mental emotional stressors. Okay. So, and I think one of the ones that's often overlooked, Dr. Rob, and it was very interesting with this 22-year-old. So can you imagine being 22 years old and being told that you have a not a grapefruit, it was an orange-sized tumor in your brain? Okay. Imagine the stress of that and having to go through the chemo and all of that. And I asked him, I said, I don't want to say his name, but I asked him, let's say his name's Fred. I said, Fred, what stress management?
So I'm going to give him a second. He just froze. If not, so, oh, there you are. Okay.
So, yeah, so I was just saying, I asked him, I said, I can only imagine the past 3 months of your life has been a living hell going through what you've gone through. But what stress management tools do you have in place to deal with the stress that you've obviously had to deal with? And he looked at me and he kind of tilted his head and he said, well, I take walks, I said, well, that's a really good start. But it was very obvious to me that he's never been taught any stress modification or stress management tools. And you say, well, what does stress have to do with inflammation? Well, it has a lot to do with inflammation. We know that sustained sympathetic tone is one of the major drivers of inflammation in the body. And the sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight system of the autonomic system that down-regulates healing and up-regulates inflammation in the body. So I think if we look at inflammation in terms of, okay, what are the major drivers of inflammation? We know that diet is a major driver of inflammation. And when you look at diet, you've got to look at insulin production, right? So you got to look at refined carbohydrates. You got to look at the toxic load of chemicals, additives, preservatives, all of the chemicals that we're ingesting into our body. So the biochemical aspect, and then also, the physical aspect. We know that one way to down-regulate inflammation is through exercise, is through getting blood flow to the appropriate joints and muscles to down-regulate inflammation. So I look at inflammation in terms of what's the major cause driving the inflammation in the body, and let's make sure that we nip that in the bud, whether that's the biochemical driver or whether that's the mental emotional driver, or whether that's the physical driver. People that are sedentary, that sit a lot, tend to have a lot more inflammatory type of chronic diseases than people that are active. That's just a fact.
Absolutely. So you speak, the inflammaging is really pre-inflammatory status that most of our patients have when they come into our office. And you're using specific markers. You said movement, use some lab markers to get a very evocative view from the inside to let them know what's going on because they can't see it. They can feel it, but they don't see it. And I think you really hit a good point in the stress. It's not just physical stress, like you said, it's mental stress, and those things damage our hormonal systems. They damage our barriers. And the real takeaway point for me, and I hope everybody caught it, was the overdrive of the sympathetics. So we as chiropractors, if you ever see a chiropractor, I know you have something different in the back. Every chiropractor's got the muscle guy, like the muscles, and every chiro's got the nerve guy. Now, you and I both went to chiro school, right? There you go. You and I, there they are. You and I both went to chiro school, and we talked about this thing called the autonomic nervous system, but not everybody put it up on their wall. And that's equally as important because the autonomics do communicate with the central nervous system, but sympathetic, fight or flight, parasympathetic, wine and dine, chill out. And if we're too sympathetic, we're producing inflammation, we're not digesting. And there are markers that you mentioned that you could look for that. So what's interesting is we've kind of talked about all the different issues. So how do we create an environment in our lives that support a successful long-term aging process?
Yeah, and I think that's really where the rubber meets the road. For me, I think one of the important things that I do when I sit down with a new patient is I get them to think about their future. One of the questions I ask people, Dr. Rob, I said, listen, if you were sitting down with yourself 5 years or 10 years down the road, knowing what you know now, and I always tell people, listen, you know all your dirty secrets, okay? You know the way you live your life better than anybody else. You know what you're doing with exercise. You know what you're doing with diet. You know if you get up in the middle of the night and go down and open the fridge and snack on some refined carbohydrate. You know if you're not resting well. You know if you're stressed out of your gourd. You know if you're abusing alcohol or drugs or prescription medication. You know all the dirty, dark secrets. So I want you to think 5 years down the road and communicate with your present tense self. And if there was one thing that you could change or one goal that you had that would ensure that you have, healthy aging or healthy functionality 5 years or 10 years down the road, what would be the most important thing that you would tell yourself? Is it, hey, I need to drop 50 pounds? Is it, hey, I need to clean up my diet? Is it, hey, I need to start an exercise program? Is it, hey, I need to start supplementing better? Is it, hey, I need to learn how to mitigate and manage the stress that I have in my life? So what are some of the goals that would really help with successful aging? And I write these things down because I think, it was interesting when I just met with this 22-year-old kid and I asked him that question. He said, Dr. Dane, before I got cancer, I just was really, a bad eater. I ate a lot of carbohydrates. I sat on my couch a lot. I didn't exercise. I was just sluggish all the time. I was sleeping all the time because I was tired. And I think it was just a vicious cycle. And so, for me, one of the major things that I want to be able to accomplish, or what I would tell myself, is that you need to have more of an active lifestyle. You need to understand why you need to be eating better and what the outcome of that is going to be in terms of making sure this cancer never comes back, or making sure that, hey, 30 years from now, I'm still enjoying a high quality of life. So I think the key is really comes down to planning and execution. As I like to tell patients, if you could have done it on your own, Dr. Robert, you probably would have done it by now. Most people, in the back of their mind, they have this positive illusion, like I had the mental discipline and the fortitude to do exactly all the things I know I should be doing. Exercise 4 or 5 times a week, eat organic, cook my own food, make sure I'm doing meditation and mindfulness, make sure I'm drinking a gallon of water a day. And I could go on and on and on. But when you think about it, there's, when you think about the physical, the mental, emotional, and the biochemical, there's a lot of things that we need to do to make sure this body is functioning, at an optimum physical level, right? And so the question is, what are you doing and what are you not doing? And if you're not doing things that you should be doing, then why are you not doing them? Most of the time it comes down to time, right? We have other priorities in our lives that take precedence over taking care of ourselves. And so it's just, to me, it's a matter of reorienting your schedule. As I like to say, that which gets scheduled gets done. it's you need to reorient your schedule to prioritize prepping your meals, prioritize taking your supplements. If you ask me, when do I exercise? It's the same time every week. When do I do my meditation? It's 5 a.m. every day. When do I take my supplements? It's always right after breakfast, which is generally around 7 a.m. So for me, all of these things have been scheduled in my life, and it's on autopilot now. I don't have to think about when I'm getting a massage this month. It's scheduled. I don't have to think about when I'm getting an adjustment. I get one every Wednesday. I don't have to think about when I'm going to the gym. I go to the gym Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, and some Saturdays if I'm not traveling. So all of these things get scheduled. So I think, again, knowing that we can predict either successful or unsuccessful aging based on a person's lifestyle and their habits early into their 20s, 30s, and 40s, it's then a matter of looking before it's a crisis and saying, okay, have I put these habits, have I scheduled them into my life so that I can truly understand the benefit that's going to arise. And it's not just a long-term benefit. Dr. Robert, I look at my life, I'm 52 years old, and I can work circles around people, and it's why, because energy is not created or destroyed. It's just transferred in forms. And Einstein said that, I didn't. Okay. So energy is not created or destroyed. It's just transferred. Okay. So when you eat, you're transferring energy. You're either transferring energy to the body, or you're transferring energy because of digestion away from the body. When you exercise, you're transferring energy into the body. We know that the brain is one of the biggest generators. We don't plug our bodies into the outlet like we do a cell phone at night. So how do we generate the energy for activities of daily living? Well, we generate it through the foods we eat, the movements we make, the thoughts we think. And so many people, Dr. Rob, when they come into my office, they have no energy. And they have no energy because their lifestyle sucks, right? So it's a matter of looking at, okay, what changes do we need to make in a person's lifestyle?
It's so true. The number one complaint that patients have going into a doctor's office right now is fatigue. Number one, the mitochondria you kind of alluding to, your powerhouse, your cell, or I like to call it your power batteries, because you can recharge them. But like you said, we can't plug in. We've got to get sleep. We've got to get nutrients. We've got to get exercise. So you gave a lot of great things. So before we get on to the supplements, give everybody 3 lifestyle hacks, just 3, that you would recommend to start them on their anti-aging health promoting program now.
Okay. So this is pretty simple for me because, again, we talked about the 3 dimensions of stress. So I'll give one in each dimension. So we'll start off with the physical health. For me, when you think about function, and I think about function, I really think about mobility through the spine. And I know this is probably maybe a little bit different than what people thought I would say, just say exercise, but it's specific type of exercise. Okay. So knowing what I see in my practice, we have 53 joints in our spine. Okay. 90% of the stimulation to your brain happens through movement in the spine. And we know that through Roger Sperry's work, who was a Nobel Prize winner. So for me, it's about not having big arms or even having big legs. It's about having a strong, stable core. It's about having good mobile spine. Okay. So I'd say one of the biggest hacks that people can do is get busy training their core. Okay. And that's for core flexibility and core strength. So things like squats, things like planks, things like bird dogs, things like spinal rotation, things like yoga, things like foam rolling the spine. So we want to try to get mobility in those 53 joints, and we want to try to strengthen the core because the core is so important, Dr. Rob, to successful aging. So that's one thing I would say, is focus on the core, because that will pay major dividends later on in life. Okay, because what's the hallmark of an aged person, Dr. Rob? Posturally.
No doubt about it. You can definitely tell. We see people who, if you will, not to get political, who run for president, and they kind of look almost the same age. They've done some hair dye and they're wearing a corset, but when you see them move, you know who the younger one is.
Right. And I'll just show you, this is a poster. I don't know if you could see it behind me, but we call it, Are You De-Evolving? And so you see a person who is upright de-evolving into a person who eventually is in a wheelchair. Okay. And so the hallmark of aging is forward posture. It's flexing on yourself until you go from a flexed forward posture to a cane, to a walker to then a wheelchair. Okay. And so we just, as I like to say this, the closer your head is to the ground, the sooner you're going to be in the ground. Okay. So we know that, that spinal stiffness is correlated with an aged person. So what I tell my patients, learn to do exercises that make the spine strong and mobile. And I think a lot of the exercises today, Dr. Rob, aren't geared towards spinal mobility and spinal strength. So that's a big one for me.
Okay? I agree with you.
Yeah.
That's a great starting point, because when you think about that, you're right about spinal stability, spinal strength. Most people are doing things that, like a crunch, like a sit-up, sitting too much, not standing. So they're damaging their spine. They're not allowing it to be stable, if you will. The other thing that's interesting is people don't realize how important that spine, that central nervous system is to their overall function. And, I did not go to what they call a philosophical chiropractic school, but the central nervous system, more and more as I delve into more and more functional medicine, is a major player, because that central nervous system has a key component to it, which is called your brain. Right. And all those neurodegenerative diseases lead you. So that's a big hack on the core and the spine. Give somebody else another couple of hacks that they can start today. So exercise your core. And I think with the exercises you said, were all exercises you could do with body weight in their home.
Yeah. And there's, I'll give a tip. There's a great book. It's called The Back Mechanic. And it's really one of my favorite books when it comes to the core and understanding some of the exercises and the importance of your core. So the back mechanic. And the second hack I would talk about is meditation and mindfulness. And this one is one, Dr. Rob, that for me personally is a big one. Again, the average human being has 60,000 thoughts a day, but the average human being, 70% of those are thoughts that don't serve our health. So they're negative thoughts, right? And, I'm a big believer that we become what we think about most of the time. And so if most of your thoughts are worry, fear, guilt, anger, okay, then guess what? That's your physiology is becoming like what you're thinking about. And the problem is we don't really take time to stop to think about what we think about. We're just thinking all the time. But we don't say, okay, are those thoughts negative? Are they positive? Are they constructive? Or are they destructive? So meditation for me is about really training my brain to stop thinking so much and be thought through. And what I mean by that is let the power of the universe come into my mind. You can call it Buddha, you can call it God, you can call it Mother Nature, you can call it innate. I don't care really what you call it. You can put a label on it, but I think it's getting out of your own mind and getting into the wisdom of the universe to say, okay, I'm going to stop thinking so much because I know most of my thoughts are thoughts of worry, thoughts of guilt, thoughts of fear. And if I'm always thinking that, I'm attracting, that's the book, The Secret. If you remember The Secret was you become what you think about. You attract into your life what you think about. But the problem is we don't ever stop to think about what we're thinking about. And so meditation to me, I think is an enormous hack. And, it's interesting, but most people don't practice meditation on a regular basis. And then the last one, obviously, would be, your diet. And for me, I think the key with your diet is to prepare your own food. I think when you're intimately involved in preparing your own food, you're going to learn how to cook well. So in my home, I really, I make breakfast. I make my lunch. Most of the time, my wife and I, we do go out and we have restaurants that we enjoy. We enjoy having a meal out together, but we love cooking at home as well. And, cooking is about cooking with healthy ingredients. Okay. Healthy cooking.
I will give him a second if he doesn't unfreeze, cooking with healthy ingredients. Okay.
Yeah.
So there you are.
So I always love talking to May because May is such an awesome cook. And I love, she's given us so many great tips for products and recipes and things like that. And you want to have a deflame diet. You want to have a diet that's not promoting inflammation, that's actually promoting anti-inflammation. So I think for me, that comes down to knowing what's in your food. Okay. And if it comes in a package or a can or a bag, you can't really know what's in it. But if you're cooking it yourself, you're going to know what you've put in that food.
Absolutely. So I know I can hear, I know you're at your office, you got some patients waiting, but I wanted to ask you, what 3 to 5 supplements are the most critical to slow down the aging process, promote healthy function in people?
So I think, one of the big things, Dr. Robin, maybe you want to talk about this because you are my guru when it comes to supplementation. But, I always talk about the big three for just general overall health. The big three for me is, taking a very pure omega-3 fatty acid. So EPA, DHA in a 3-to-2 ratio of EPA to DHA. So I personally take about 3,000 milligrams of omega-3 a day. And my capsules are 600 milligrams of EPA, 400 milligrams of DHA. I take 3 of those a day. The other big one for me, and I alternate between something called a Spore Probio and then an Ultrabiotic Daily. So I take a supercharged probiotic 1 month, and then I switch to just a general probiotic that has a lot of different cultures and is very diverse. So probiotic is another one for me, and then vitamin D3 would be the third. But when we're talking about aging, now we have to start talking about things like mitochondria to really supercharge our mitochondria, and that would be things like alpha lipoic acid and glutathione. So I do a sublingual glutathione spray. Vitamin C. I buy vitamin C chewables. One hack, Dr. Rob, that my patients always come back and tell me they love. They never heard this before, but a lot of us have sugar cravings. And you and I both know that vitamin C has a very similar molecular structure to glucose, to sugar, right? And that's why if you've ever chewed on a vitamin C, it kind of tastes sweet because it's very similar in nature without the insulin producing capacity that sugar is going to have. So when you have a sugar craving, you should chew a vitamin C because I find that that's going to quelch that sugar craving. So if you're getting a sugar craving, chew a 500 milligram vitamin C and give yourself 5 to 10 minutes. I can almost promise you your sugar craving is going to go away. So those would be the big ones. Vitamin C, alpha lipoic acid, glutathione, a good probiotic, omega-3, and vitamin D3. Those that's basically what I take every single day. I take a couple other things to support healthy liver function, support my brain, things like that. But those are the biggies.
Those are great. I'll kick in a curcumin. Great. I mean, that's in a lot of what you take, anti-inflammatory, green tea. Collagen, that's my source of protein now. Collagen will help knit you back up. So the anti-aging and the wrinkles and everything. And something that's really big in the market now is NMN, which makes NAD+, which is shown to be anti-aging. So there's a plethora of things that we all can choose from as long as they are on that path of a good diet, good exercise, good mind, and some supplements, hence supplements to the other lifestyle hacks. They're on a good pathway. Do you have any tests in the office that you give them before I let you go for anti-aging, or that you would correlate for anti-aging? I know you had said you did blood tests, but what about some in-office tests that you may have for them?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do is we do something called a wellness score on our patients, Dr. Rob, where we looked at different biomarkers of health. So we look at, again, a functional movement screen to see how they're moving. We look at their muscle mass. We look at their body fat mass and where they're carrying fat. So if they have a lot of visceral fat. We look at their blood pressure. We look at their resting pulse. We look at their pulse ox. So we look at a lot of different functions, and then we put into a software called a wellness score, and it actually gives the person a grade. So we know, if I had a woman in last night, she's not in very good health, and she scored a 34 out of 100. And almost every marker was in the red. So she was in the danger zone with her blood pressure, with her BMI, with her resting pulse, with her waist circumference, with her functional movement screen. She failed almost every single functional movement test. Her visceral fat was pegged at 20, which means I think she was carrying 46 pounds of visceral fat. This right here is a pound of fat right here. Imagine me taking 46 of this and stuffing this in and around your organs. This is a driver of inflammation in the body. Okay, we know that visceral fat produces 17 inflammatory cytokines, C-reactive protein being one of them, right? So, knowing your waist circumference and knowing your visceral fat is extremely important to know how you're going to age. As my sister likes to say, Dr. Rob, it may be ugly to have a big butt, but it's deadly to have a big gut. Okay,
that's a good one.
If you're okay with a big butt, okay, that's all subcutaneous fat, but you don't want the big gut because a lot of that gut is going to be visceral fat, which is very pro-inflammatory in nature and leads to chronic disease. So I would say that's the big ones that we do in our office, Dr. Rob, to assess somebody's function as far as aging. Great. And I'm sorry if you hear I have my little doggy in here with me.
There he is.
So he's hanging out in the office with me, and he's crying a little bit because he wants to get out. But I can't let him out.
Not just yet.
Come here, Tuck. Come here. Come say hi to everybody.
There you go.
So yeah, it was. So any other questions?
Yeah. Well, I know I already got it. They're blowing up on my phone. Not everybody puts it up on the thread here. No, he's adorable.
Yeah, this is my.
Does he have anything to say?
Tuck, he just wants to just say that everybody needs to go see Dr. Rob or an anti-aging specialist. And as I like to say, you have your sick care doctor, but you need a healthcare doctor. Just like the 22-year-old mother said, you know, they've been to every doctor imaginable to kill the cancer, to fight the disease, but they haven't been to a doctor to help promote health and healing in the body. So I would say the biggest thing is, who do you have on your team? Do you have a wellness coach or a wellness doctor on your team? You certainly probably have, you know, a specialist, you know, gastroenterologist. You probably have rheumatologists. You have, you know, your family practitioner. But you really need somebody that you can trust that's an integrated healthcare doctor.
I agree. So how can everybody get in touch with you and visit your friend?
So they could come to my office in Newtown, Pennsylvania. You're always welcome. So we have a wellness center, Dr. Rob. So let's just, I think this would be pretty cool to walk around and give everybody a tour.
They
but
love that. Hey, a good friend
really
of ours, Dr. Steve Capuana, said hello.
Oh, okay, cool. This is what a wellness center looks like. All right. So I just want to walk people through my office. This is actually our fitness center here. So if we come in, the lights are kind of out, but you can see this is a whole space in my office devoted to fitness. This is generally loaded. It's lunchtime, but this is generally loaded with people working out. We have 2 treatment rooms. So if you look here, we have 2 doctors that work. This is my office here. We have digital radiography. We have another doctor's office here. There's another integrated healthcare doctor that works in here. Okay. And then if I go up to the front, you're going to see, you know, all of the different services. So we offer acupuncture, massage, chiropractic. We have a nutritionist on staff. We have a full-time nutritionist on our staff. So I'll just show you our waiting room here. So this is our reception area here. This is where we kind of greet patients. So you can see that's our receptionist. This over here is all of the supplements that we use in our office. So this is, you know, our chiropractic area. And we have 10,000 square feet here. So we're a big facility, but we're dedicated to one thing, and that's evaluating people's health and then getting them in the right services, whether that's nutrition or exercise. And again, it goes back to what I said earlier, that which gets scheduled gets done. Everybody has a grand plan that, hey, you know, I'm going to do this on my own. And then they go home and they don't do anything. And so you need a good coach and you need a good plan and you need somebody who's going to help hold you accountable.
No doubt. So they can get in touch with you, just reach out to you. Any parting words as you showed them your place and the dog? The dog's cute.
Yeah. Any parting words? No, I just say, you know, get after it. Like I said, I think everybody, you know, they can reach me. They, you know, go to 8ww.com. That's our program, 8 Weeks to Wellness, but it's the number 8ww.com. They can find me on Facebook, Dr. Dane Donohue, and friend me. You know, there's lots of places to find me. But I think the most important thing is to have a doctor in your community that you could see on a regular basis that can do these tests and sit down with you and come up with a game plan and then hold you accountable to doing it.
Great words of wisdom. It's always a pleasure.
Always.
Say hi to your wife, Jill.
I will do that
for me. And I appreciate all that you do for me and all that you do in healthcare and the fact that you help people every day. You know, that's lost. Sometimes, you know, we look at this big horizon called what we're on right now, like a TV type thing, but we don't realize and we sometimes forget that one-on-one. As long as we still have that, we can project the information that we need to share with people at a much larger scale.
Yeah, and there's so many people that need help, Dr. Rob, and unfortunately, you know, our healthcare system is not a healthcare system; it's a disease care system, and we need to flip that. You know, we need to make sure that people are getting true healthcare before they have the crisis. You know, before they get down the road and recognize that I don't have my cognitive function or my physical function, and there's a good chance I may never get it back because far too much water has gone under the bridge. You know, so we have to get out and start educating people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s to encourage them to live the healthy lifestyle.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate your time. Enjoy your patients that are going to be walking in shortly. Everybody, that's Dr. Dane Donohue, co-founder of 8 Weeks to Wellness.
Take care, Dr. Rob.
Take care.